To this now, President Cyril Ramaphosa has expressed his condolences following the passing of anti-apartheid activist Aziz Pahad. Pahad died at his Johannesburg home yesterday. He was 82. He served as Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and Member of Parliament from 1994 until 2008. Pahad is being remembered for his many contributions to South Africa, especially the formulation of the country's policy on the Middle East and his opposition to the US-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Pahad's journey in politics spans back to the apartheid era. A staunch advocate for non-racialism, Pahad played a significant role in the establishment of the anti-apartheid movement in the United Kingdom and Europe, and held public and secret transition talks with different role players in order to end apartheid. This eventually led to the unbanning of political organizations, the release of Nelson Mandela, and dialogues and discussions that eventually led to a free democratic South Africa. Amongst his domestic and international accolades, Pahad was awarded the Ubuntu O.R. Tambo Lifetime Achievement Diplomacy Award in 2022 in recognition of his role in forging peace in conflict-ridden countries in some parts of the African continent. Former Ambassador Welile Nhlapo says the late former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Aziz Pahad, was one of the architects of South African foreign policy. Nhlapo says Pahad was passionate about seeing the country excel globally. The former ambassador spoke to Khayelihle Khumalo on the sidelines of the BRICS Parliamentary Forum in Kempton Park earlier today.
Well, certainly the tributes have just been coming in far and wide as South Africa remembers one of the remarkable diplomats, the late former Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs, Aziz Pahad. But joining us now is someone who's really quite familiar with the diplomatic circles here in South Africa, Ambassador Nhlapo. Thank you so much indeed, sir, for your time.
No, thank you very much.
Lovely. Maybe just first and foremost, Ambassador Nhlapo, your immediate reaction, quite tragic news of the passing of one of the most iconic minds when you talk about South Africa's foreign policy.
I think it's a sad day for all of us practitioners and those who are following the implementation of foreign policy in South Africa. Which has everything to do with what Aziz represented. Was one of the architects of that foreign policy and one of the key people in ensuring that it is meticulously implemented. You wouldn't falter Aziz on anything that has to do with foreign policy. Any complicated problem that you wanted solved, Aziz would be there. Think it through, work through others and with others, and make sure that it delivers. Nobody would have thought that somebody could be entrusted to go to Iraq and talk to Saddam Hussein and his people to offer South Africa's assistance in establishing whether there is any weapons of mass destruction. And he was able to do that. We went there several times. Even Hans Blix, who was heading that mission of the UN to establish that fact, depended largely on the access that Aziz had and the expertise that we brought ourselves to be able to prove that there is no such. And when that was established, and this was communicated to those who were interested in knowing, the bombarding started.
And just in making sure that we keep his legacy alive, I mean, you look at his passion around seeing peace in the Middle East, you know, just trying to find a long-lasting peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, looking at also the contribution he made in terms of making sure that there is peace in Burundi and other parts of the continent as well. How do you make sure that we keep his legacy alive?
Well, the best way we need to do to keep his legacy alive is to make sure that those who are the current practitioners, who are in the cold face of the implementation of our foreign policy, are properly prepared to have the necessary diplomatic skills to navigate very difficult terrains and be able, in the end, to make sure that our objectives or what we want to achieve actually does happen. There's a lot of serious diplomatic skills. And therefore we need to skill our diplomats, train them, and make sure they understand why that. If you think that diplomacy, if you are in DIRCO, that is a job, you're in the wrong place. That thing requires passion. There is no 8 to 5 anytime. The world does not work on the basis of your time scale. Anything happens anytime. And time differences sometimes can work against you. And even weekends, if something erupts and you are responsible, you have to stop everything and be able to prepare a brief, for instance, for the minister or for the president. So it means you have to be on the ball all the time and understand exactly what is it that is required.
And maybe just before I let you go, Ambassador, any just particular moments? I mean, he was a very jovial character. He was very forthright. For you, just personally, any particular moment that is standing out when you think of Aziz Pahad?
You know, I've known Aziz since 1977. When I first met him in Angola, he came to the camp where we were training with Dr. Dadu. That's when I established contact with him because I was a librarian there and needed books. He promised and he delivered. But one of the things about Aziz, for instance, even now, as he was ill, all the time say, Aziz, what are the doctors saying? Because you've been in and out of there. And he says, you see, unfortunately this time I can't change the doctor. He says, if a doctor begins to know what you drink and start telling you that you must stop that blend of whiskey, change him. Because it means that he's not being honest with you. He's now seeing you as a competitor. But also, to be honest, he managed his health crisis very well. Everything for him, it was like almost like, taking it easy, but at the same time, be able to say, because I remember the last time when I saw him, he says to me, you see, now I'm on a pram, I'm being pushed around like a baby. He was on a wheelchair. As typical as he said, he was laughing. He would joke and laugh. Whenever you're with Aziz, laughter becomes a permanent part of your presence and engagements and discussions. Very jolly fellow.
Thank you so much indeed for your time, Ambassador. That's, of course, Ambassador Nhlapo, really reflecting on the life and times of the late former Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, Aziz Pahad, really saying that he's one of the architects of South Africa's foreign policy and really just dedicated a significant part of his life fighting against apartheid and eventually making sure that South Africa is free. Khayelihle Khumalo, SABC News, Kempton Park.
Our political parties at the same time have described Pahad as a man who was committed to nation building, human rights and a peaceful international community.
Focus is saddened by the passing away of one of our veterans, Comrade Aziz Pahad, who served in this country by excellence. He was appointed as a deputy minister in 1994 to 2008. That on his own is a clear demonstration of his passion, his love and commitment to serve. The policies that we're implementing now, he has been very instrumental in those international policies that South Africa is owning up. We are saying we have lost a great leader.
Mr. Pahad was an exemplary diplomat for our country in his role as the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he played an instrumental role in helping to position South Africa internationally as, an important player in international relations and foreign matters.
He also continued to serve as an international diplomat who represented our nation on the global stage with distinction. His legacy is one of commitment to the principles of equality, justice and human rights, and his legacy will forever inspire us to continue the journey toward a more just and equitable society.
He
also served as Deputy Minister of International Relations and played a very important role in positioning South Africa in terms of the government's policy. He was also involved in negotiations during the 1994 process between the ANC and the predecessor of the Freedom Front Plus, the Afrikaner Volksfront.
His love of Afrikaans literature proved to be very useful in early talks with Afrikaner leaders. In 1963, Pahad and his brother Isop were banned under the Suppression of Communism Act, which restricted his movements and prevented him from attending public gatherings. During this time, he was often detained for short periods for violating the order.
An upright person, a wonderful individual who was committed to building our country, and we just trust that his soul would rest in peace and that his family would take comfort from the fact that he had really committed himself to nation building and to ensuring that the South Africa of 1994 is a better South Africa today.
Aziz Pahad was an anti-apartheid activist who dedicated his life to the service of our country. South Africa has lost another great leader who was critical to our transition to democracy.
He was a selfless leader who fought for the liberation of all South Africans, irrespective of their race, religion, culture, or tribe.
He did his utmost to prevent a US-led invasion of Iraq and to prevent the building of the apartheid wall in occupied Palestine. So we remember him for that. But we must also remember that he was a champion for equal rights, which we don't see in the South Africa of today.
Aziz Pahad was a senior comrade in the liberation movement and was an example of diplomatic etiquette. He was very good at treating his comrades with respect and dignity. Despite being in the cycles of the Charterists, his broad-minded approach to issues and to every question raised made him a sociable person to hold discussions with.
Comrade Aziz Pahad's commitment to the liberation project, his commitment to social justice, and his exhibition of high moral ethics distinguishes him from many of his comrades who have sold their souls